Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into a deeply intertwined, almost hidden history. We're going to explore the cosmic and spiritual bond between humans and animals. Drawing on some really profound esoteric texts and the lectures of Rudolf Steiner, we're tracing a shared evolutionary journey. It's a journey that actually suggests our connection to the animal kingdom is far more complex, and frankly, carries a much heavier debt than modern science might lead you to believe.
Let's kick things off with a question that might seem kind of simple at first glance. Why does a beaver just naturally know how to build a complex dam, while a human baby has to be taught absolutely everything? I mean, we see this everywhere in nature, right? Animals are born with these incredible innate skills. A beaver builds a flawless lodge. A wasp crafts a perfect nest. Yet a human infant is born completely helpless, needing years of painstaking instruction just to learn the very basics of survival. Well, according to our esoteric sources, this isn't some random evolutionary accident. It's actually the result of a massive cosmic divergence.
Section 1. The Cosmic Split, Sun, Moon, and Earth.
So, to understand this massive divergence, we actually have to scale way back to primordial planetary epochs. According to Steiner's spiritual investigations, humans and animals once shared the exact same evolutionary path during a primeval period known as the Saturn evolution. But here's where things get interesting. For humanity to develop an individual I, or ego, the Earth's environment had to be perfectly calibrated. It couldn't be too volatile, so the immense forces of the sun literally had to exit and separate from the Earth. And it couldn't be too rigid or dense either, so the retarding forces of the moon also had to split away. This precise cosmic calibration left the Earth with the absolute perfect tempo for human development.
But during these massive cosmic shifts, not all organisms progressed. And this brings us to a really crucial esoteric concept: remaining behind. This is basically where certain beings stay at a denser, more rigid physical stage. When the moon's rigid forces separated from the Earth, the ancestors of modern humanity remained pliable, ready to be refined by spiritual souls. But other organisms, they had hardened. They sank into density, remaining behind in that denser state. And these organisms became the ancestors of our present animal kingdom, ultimately providing a stable evolutionary foundation that allowed humanity to ascend.
Moving on to Section 2, Inward versus Outward, the Architecture of Evolution. Now, this architectural divergence literally answers our opening question about the beaver and the baby. On one side, we've got the animal kingdom. Animals retained incredibly complex spiritual forces, but they project them entirely outward into the physical world, creating these perfect structures by sheer innate law. On the flip side, we have humans. We actually possess those exact same artistic forces, but instead of building dams or nests, we took those forces and turned them inward. We used all of that cosmic energy to construct a perfected brain, a complex nervous system, and an inner organization capable of housing an individual reincarnating soul. This idea is summed up brilliantly in a quote from Rudolf Steiner. He observed, "We have our beaver building within, and therefore we are no longer able to manifest these forces outwardly. Because our internal beaver spent all its energy building our highly refined brains and bodies, we are born physically helpless, but we're born spiritually capable. The animals kept the external skills. We basically traded them for a profound internal spiritual transformation."
Section 3. Ejecting the dregs, leaving our shadows behind.
Now, building that perfect inner temple, it came at a steep price. And actually, it wasn't a price we paid ourselves. Humanity achieved its higher state by literally ejecting its worst astral qualities right into the evolving animal kingdom. The text tells us we should not have got rid of the dregs if we had not left the animals behind. Think of it kind of like a glass of muddy water, where all the heavy sediment is forced to the bottom so the water at the top can finally become clear. So what exactly did we leave behind in that sediment? Well, think about the cruelty we see in nature, the slyness of the fox, those ferocious instinctual passions. These were actually once our traits. We liberated our own astral bodies from these grosser, violent tendencies by leaving them behind in the animal forms that had hardened during those ancient cosmic epochs. The animals literally absorbed our developmental shadows. And this leads to a pretty deep cosmic tragedy. Because animals possess an astral body, they're fully capable of feeling pain and suffering. However, unlike us, they do not possess an individual I, or ego. Therefore, the animal kingdom bears the heavy burden of our ancient suffering and our ancient vices, but they completely lack the individual power to spiritually overcome that pain. They suffer it, but they can't use it to perfect themselves.
Which brings us to Section 4, the group soul, the collective animal spirit.
So if animals don't have an individual ego,
How exactly does their spiritual consciousness function? Well, it happens through something called the group soul. Because animals don't have a reincarnating individual spirit, their life force belongs to a massive collective entity that exists on the mental plane. This overarching entity projects its energy downwards, ensouling multiple physical animals on the physical plane. So, how does animal learning actually happen? It's entirely a collective process. An individual animal lives its physical life, experiencing its environment. But when that animal dies, its specific life force doesn't just pass on to a new body individually, it returns to the mental plane. Up there, those unique experiences mingle and merge right back into the shared group soul. The next generation of animals born from that group soul then inherits those accumulated experiences. That, fundamentally, is what we call instinct. It's just the innate memory of thousands of past physical lives returning to the collective. Then, over vast periods of time, as animals face totally different climates and environments, that massive group soul begins to fracture and specialize. For instance, a giant original canine group soul subdivides into wolves, foxes, jackals, and eventually dogs. A feline group soul breaks into lions, tigers, and domestic cats. As they gather really distinct environmental experiences, these souls become smaller, tighter, and highly specialized.
Section 5, the evolutionary debt, guiding animal souls.
Now, this esoteric history intersects beautifully with our daily lives. Take a domestic dog, let's call him Jack. When an animal group soul becomes highly specialized, it starts coming into really close contact with humanity. As we lavish affection upon a specific animal like Jack, the high vibrations of our thoughts actually begin to pull a tiny piece of that group soul upward, breaking it away from the collective. This is the very beginning of individualization. Our love literally draws a single soul out of the collective, preparing it to eventually become a human-like individuality. So how exactly do we act as catalysts for this huge shift? We do it by bringing animals into domesticity and showing them genuine, selfless affection. Crucially, our job is to actively wean out their savage instincts. You know, those very dregs we left behind ages ago. The sources explicitly warn us against exploiting their cunning. So, training dogs purely to be vicious hunters or exploiting their base instincts for our own gratification, doing that actually harms their spiritual evolution. The overarching theme across all these sources is one of profound responsibility. It's what we call our evolutionary debt. The esoteric truth presented here is that our human perfection, our ability to think, to reason, and to overcome pain, all of that cost the animals their progression. They literally sank into density so we could rise into clarity. Therefore, we owe them. We owe them our spiritual guidance to help pull them upward out of that collective state. Steiner puts this karmic reality into really stark terms. He says, "What I have once incurred in debt to the animal, I have to make good now toward the animals through the very way I treat them." So this isn't just about being nice to pets, right? It's framed as a cosmic necessity. By understanding this karma, we realize that when we care for an animal, when we elevate its consciousness through love, we are actively repaying an ancient, primordial debt to the beings that sacrifice their evolutionary progress for ours. Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder. Knowing what we've explored in this explainer today, knowing that the animal kingdom carries the heavy burden of our own cosmic past, our own ancient vices, and that they suffer without the ego to overcome it, how will this ancient debt change the way you treat the animals in your life tomorrow? It certainly changes the way you look at a dog's devotion or a cat's gaze, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and until next time, keep learning and keep seeking.